Professor Reed really gave a lot more articulate analysis as to what I've always, championed the
Hmm.
entire time. Like, we really shouldn't be letting this type of stuff distract from the actual material situation. And when people move up into a class or they're surrounded by certain people, they have an identity, a shared identity, a common interest that they're naturally going to express,
Yeah.
which is the same argument I make about Barack Obama. When he went and lived and worked and learned amongst the elite, he becomes one of them and he sees things from their perspective. It's the same argument I'll make about Hillary Clinton. As a multimillionaire, business owner, and things of that nature, she's going to see things
Yeah.
based off of what her class, how they see things, and that's just completely different from what's needed when you're talking about someone having the perspective of a middle class or just like an average working person. And that's
Yeah.
why I really feel like we kind of failed in that regard. But I think at this point, this is what I've been saying the entire time. We need to start battling for the ideas.
Yeah.
Like the meritocracy, we have to break it. Neoliberalism, we have to break it. And we can't break it just by assuming that, we can wait till election time comes around.
Yep.
We
Yep.
really need to start with the next generation. I'm sorry to say it like this, but for the most part, many members of the baby boomers, they're gone. They've been propagandized for 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
It's too late for them. However, the Gen X, the millennial generation, and generation after that,
Hmm.
if we can really start battling for the ideas in the hearts and minds of people, we can really start to do something because a campaign can't counteract 40 years of propaganda. It just can't. No matter how much outreach you put out there, you cannot change somebody's mind with just an outreach campaign
Yeah.
from a particular campaign. That has to be won
On the
through,
ground for
massive grassroots
years.
activism,
Yeah.
years in advance for the campaign to even come because the propagandized mind is just not even open to the message.
Mm.
They have to be open to the message to even hear what you're saying. And I think a friend of mine always says this whenever I talk to someone about politics. He goes, Nick, he's hearing you, but he ain't hearing you. And I was like, oh, man. Whenever he says that, it really makes me laugh. But that's what we're faced with here.
Yeah.
We're faced with a situation where you have people who have made it to where they have made it. Maybe it's based off of anti-discrimination laws or,
Yeah.
affirmative action that may have allowed them to get there. But now that they're there,
But
they see that that they've got there on their own merit and there was no
hmm.
help. And that's all there is to it. And everybody just needs to pick up their bootstraps and,
Yep.
and, and, and make something happen for themselves rather than
Here's
looking
a
at the systemic situation. Go ahead.
here's the question that I should have thought to ask Professor Reed, and actually, hell, the more I talk, the more my coffee wears off, and I'm getting sleepy, and I'm forgetting my question. Here it is: the real intersectionality, right? If you're going to really be intersectional, you have to bring in voices that are not in the elite class. You have to bring in leadership from someone from the working class, somebody. And to me, that is the most impossible type of intersectionality to have an expectation for, because can you imagine people intentionally including someone who makes $30,000 a year in a decision that's going to affect everyone across the nation? I mean, poor people would be appalled, black people would be appalled, white people would be appalled, because we have this natural predilection to want to be ruled by people who are elite. What do you think about that, man?
I don't know. I'm 50-50. So
Okay.
I do want individuals that are not a part of the formalized elite to be in the decision making process.
Hmm.
However, there's a difference between somebody who's not elite and somebody who's educated or somebody who knows what the situation is or understands some sort of
Ah,
technical aspect of the
but
issue.
but you're
So
running to, let me
let's
cut you, let
say
me let me let me push back on you, because you're running into this thought that Professor Reed was actually unpacking today, that we have this natural alignment and expectation that or we make this correlation, that's the phrase I'm looking for, this correlation between intellect and elitism, right? Like some of the people that we think are smart and elite are probably some of the most they might have a lot of degrees, but probably some of the dimmest people that we ever run into. So, how do you avoid that? We have your first reaction to it, not to put you on blast, but this is everyone's, even mine. Our first reaction is if somebody's making 30,000 a year, they probably don't have as much education or intelligence, a proxy for intelligence, as someone who's making $150,000 a year. You and I both know this construct, but you and I just fell into the same exact thing.
Well, actually, I wasn't making it based off of what they make. If it's really not about what they make, it's about what they know and what they understand. So, what I would argue is that my version of elitism is not saying you need to have the best people from Harvard or all these elite colleges. I'm saying get individuals that actually have expertise on the issue or that
Mm-hmm.
actually understand some sort of insight on the issue that's backed up by empirical data that matches, right? Like you can't have someone saying, well, this is how it works. And if you look at their thesis and you look at what's happened in the past, that is it's a clear 180, which is what we have with the economics profession today. So we can't have that kind of thing going on. But at the same time, that's not to say we just pick random Joe Smo off the street who's been propagandized to believe things that may not be true just as well as anybody else. It's not necessarily an academic thing or a smart versus dumb or something like that. It really is somebody who understands an issue versus somebody who does not. Limited versus in-depth knowledge.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
we
really an elite or how much you make or what your credentials are. It's really, do you
but
have an
but
understanding of something?
when do we ever place that specific expectation on? I mean, hell, we just came from 8 years of George W. Bush, right? To just be, hyperbolic, not even hyperbolic, it's just quite true, understanding of the problem. We don't really put that expectation on people so long as they're stamped with a certain type of elitism. It comes with, it's baked into the system for people who went to Harvard, even though the person who went to Harvard might not know as much as somebody who went to Mississippi State University, right? Or not even Mississippi State, because that's quasi elite. Jackson State, right? So we have this rubber stamp of acceptance and belief in their ability to lead us based on their economic strata and or their education strata, that what type of elitism. And so, but to go full circle to my point is that this intersectionality falls off completely when we consider class, because everyone who is in our ruling class has this expectation that you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you're only making so much, that's really your fault. You either didn't go to the right school or you just didn't work hard enough while you were at the right school. Let me
Yeah, I think
go
the
ahead.
myth of
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think the myth of meritocracy is probably one of the most devastating
Yeah,
blows that we have to real progressivism,
yeah,
and that's why I mean I've waged a personal war against that and corporatism, like right off the bat. Those are two things that you really have to combat because they lend themselves to almost a neoliberal outlook on the world without any type of reality-based,
yeah,
analysis whatsoever. And it's really hard to counteract that, like you just spoke about. Unless somebody has certain credentials, we don't trust them or we don't listen to them or they don't know what they're talking about. And what I'm saying is you don't use their credentials to understand what they're talking about. You listen to what they actually have to say and what their analysis is and compare it to what the
yeah,
actual empirical data is, and that's how you decide who
yeah.
knows what they're talking about and who does not. It's meritocratic, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
meritocratic in its own right, like it's a true meritocratic sense, like
Yeah.
not a faux meritocratic sense.